Hello there. Today I'm continuing to look at the wines of Domaine du Pelican from Arbois in the Jura in eastern France. So this is a red wine. This is the Trois Cepages from 2021. I guess probably about 25% of Jura's wines are red. The Trois Cepages, the three grape varieties used in this, are a blend predominantly of Pinot Noir, about 60%, with 35% of Trousseau and 5% of Poulsard. So the last two being, local grape varieties, largely only found in this region. The estate here, Domaine du Pelican, as I've said in previous videos, has actually been fairly recently created in 2012, and it's had quite a stratospheric rise to producer of highly rated fine wines. The estate was set up by Guillaume d'Angeville, from the Volnay producer Marquis d'Angeville, along with his regisseur Francois Duvivier, who's gone on to run the property here. Their wines are made biodynamically. They have 15 hectares of vines, 10 hectares of which they initially bought by buying Chateau Chavin, and also by buying another 5 hectares of vines from somebody called Jean-Marc Bignot. And then 2 years later they managed to lease vines from the retiring legendary winemaker of Jura, Jacques Pouffny. Now, ever since they set out in 2012, they've been making this red wine from these three grape varieties, all from vineyards around Montigny-lès-Arsures. All three varieties are vinified together. Aging goes on for a year, and that is 50% in Burgundy barriques, 228 litre barriques, and the balance in larger foudre. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? First thing to say, incredibly pale colour. The really is, it's almost rosé-esque in its depth. Swirling it, it's not particularly clicking to the glass. I put it into a nice large glass because I want to allow the aromas to express themselves, because I'm expecting this to be fairly delicate and aromatic. And actually, my first impression, it's almost like a Beaujolais in it. The open, fresh fruit. It's light. But then there's a slightly wild note to it as well. There's a sort of slightly spicy, slightly leafy freshness to the entire set of aromas. Almost with a sort of a slight hint of anise. But then also there's a very pure, sort of almost like a strawberry syrup note there. I suppose the wildness is taking it on into sort of raspberry notes. There's notes of red cherry, some sort of slightly high-toned, almost as if slightly spirity notes. Perhaps there are even some sort of slightly earthy notes as well. Perhaps the start of a sort of a mushroomy note. So let's taste and see what we make of it. There's fresh acidity. The wine is light-bodied. There is a sort of a slightly earthy note to the fruit, which is much less high-toned than it seemed on the nose. There's almost a sort of a rich plum to slightly cooked note, sort of a slightly prune note to the red fruit. I mean, there's still a lifted, fresh, plummy note, but there's sort of that additional, I suppose, heading towards jammy depth and developed roundness, I suppose. And maybe that's heading on towards that slight mushroomy note that's just starting to form there. The alcohol doesn't assert itself on the palate, and the delicate fresh fruit is allowed to show through. And as a result, you've got this lovely lifted red fruit, almost like sort of rose petals, maybe more towards a sort of a peony or something like that. That's sort of slightly more lifted perfume. And that's what lingers to the finish. In terms of structure, I barely mentioned it. There is a fine tannin and there's a slight drying note, but the tannins aren't particularly assertive. It doesn't strike me as a wine for long aging. I suspect you could probably keep it for 4 or 5 years very happily, and it would start to develop those sort of maybe truffle mushroom notes, which could make it really interesting for food pairings. There's a freshness and an intensity of the fruit that I think could mean that it could surprise you with its aging ability. Just its elegance. I think it could develop those perfumes, and this could be a wine that could be really interesting to revisit in 4 or 5 years. Thank you for watching. If you found the video interesting, do please like, share, do sign up and follow us on YouTube. Do please leave comments. We'd love to hear what you think about the wines or what you think about the videos. But most importantly, I hope you managed to find time to join us for another tasting again really soon. Goodbye for now.